The American Revolution, or the Revolutionary War, was one of the most important events in American history. It was the war that was fought for independence from Britain. King George III was ruling at the time. There were many happenings that contributed to the start of the Revolution, but I will only be talking about the key events. First, the Stamp Act. Next, the Boston Massacre. Then, the Boston Tea Party. After that, Paul Revere's Ride. And last but not least, the Declaration of Independence. The Stamp Act of 1765 was a tax that King George III put on the colonies. It taxed the colonists on all paper goods and legal documents such as leases, newspapers, birth certificates, even playing cards. Many patriots thought that this was outrageous and either became public speakers like Patrick Henry, members of the Sons and Daughters of Liberty like Paul Revere, or Minutemen of the Continental Army. Back in Parliament, however, members in the House of Commons and the House of Lords thought differently. The French and Indian War had just ended, so the treasury was very low on money. King George III and Parliament came up with the Stamp Act as a way of making money for Britain. Documented by Parliament member George Grenville, the Stamp Act was the first of a series of acts and one of the most important in the Revolution. The Boston Massacre of 1770 was a fight between 10 redcoat soldiers and several patriots. A guard named Hugh White was guarding a loyalist's house when some patriots started harassing him. Hugh White called for help, and 9 other redcoat soldiers came to his aid. An anonymous person yelled, "Fire!" and the soldiers shot at the patriots. 3 people were killed, 8 were wounded, 2 of which died later. Many colonists thought that the redcoat soldiers should be arrested for murder because they were armed with rifles and the patriots were armed with only snowballs and sticks. But John Adams, future President of the United States, disagreed. No one knew who had told the soldiers to fire, he said, and that they were firing in self-defense. He thought that they deserved a fair trial. John Quincy Adams backed up the Patriots. He didn't think it was fair that the redcoats had bullets while the Patriots had snowballs. Harassed or not, Hugh White and his fellow soldiers didn't have the right to murder some innocent people, John Quincy thought. John Quincy and John Adams brought the conflict to court. After a long time, the judge concluded that the Patriots, Hugh White, and 7 other redcoats were found not guilty. The other 2 soldiers were found guilty of manslaughter. The Boston Tea Party of 1773 was a protest against the Tea Act, which was one of the acts following the Stamp Act. By now, the Sons of Liberty and Paul Revere had had enough of King George's acts. The Sons of Liberty was a secret organization formed by patriot men who protested against the acts and wanted to be free from Great Britain. To protest against the Tea Act, one person sent a letter to the captains of the tea ships. It said, "I wouldn't dock if I were you." For the boats that decided to dock, the men dressed like Native Americans and dumped their tea into the harbor. Overall, they dumped 342 chests of tea into the Boston harbor. It caused quite a commotion in Boston. In the Houses of Parliament in Britain, King George III and his fellow Parliament members were outraged. King George's plan to make the colonists buy their tea by lowering the prices was foiled. He closed the ports and did not open them again until the Patriots apologized. Paul Revere's Midnight Ride of 1775 was the event that started the Revolution. Samuel Adams and John Hancock had left some important papers and military supplies in a secret hiding place. Paul Revere and William Dawes, who were members of the secret organization known as the Sons of Liberty, set out and were later joined by Dr. Samuel Prescott. Their job was to retrieve the papers and to warn the villagers while they were at it. They knew that the redcoats were going to come to Lexington, but they had no way of knowing as to how they would get there. So Paul Revere told his friend to climb up to the belfry tower of the Old North Church in Boston to hang a lantern or 2 according to the following instructions. 1 if by land, and 2 if by sea. His friend hung 2 lanterns, therefore the redcoats were coming by sea. Revere, Dawes, and Prescott shouted, "The redcoats are coming," as they galloped through the streets. Later on, Paul Revere was captured, but he convinced the soldiers to let him go, so they just took his horse. The Declaration of Independence of 1776 was one of the most important documents in American history. It was written by Thomas Jefferson and proofreaded by other signers. It ensured assured that America would be run by a democracy and that we, the people, had the right to overthrow any government that was not ruling fairly. The signers were very happy with it and loved the fact that it listed the 27 ways King George had harmed the colonies. John Hancock was so proud of the Declaration that he made his signature humongous. Today, it is still intact. A while later, Congress voted for whether the Declaration of Independence would be official. The majority voted yes. Then they wrote a document called the Treaty of Paris that declared the 13 colonies independent from Britain. King George hesitated, but eventually he signed, and the 13 colonies became the free United States of America.